Billionaire father sees black waitress teaching his blind daughter to sing, and his life changes forever. In the heart of Manhattan's Le Bernardin, where champagne flutes cost more than most monthly rent payments, 200 conversations die mid-sentence. Forks pause halfway to mouths. Even the piano player's fingers freeze above ivory keys. All eyes turn to table 7, where something impossible is unfolding. A young black waitress in a faded uniform kneels beside a small girl with clouded eyes. The child's face, moments ago twisted in distress, now glows with wonder. Together, their voices rise in harmony. Amazing grace. Flowing like liquid gold through crystal air, the waitress's name tag reads Maya in block letters, the plastic worn smooth from countless shifts. Her hands, gentle as prayer, guide the girl's trembling fingers to feel the vibrations in her throat as they sing. At the table's edge, a man in a $3,000 suit stands frozen. Richard Sterling, whose name graces buildings across 3 continents, watches his 8-year-old daughter Sophia discover something he spent millions trying to buy: pure, unguarded joy. In this suspended moment, where wealth means nothing and connection means everything, 3 lives are about to change forever. The last note fades. The silence returns. But it's different now. 6 months earlier, the penthouse overlooking Central Park sits in perpetual twilight. Richard Sterling keeps the curtains drawn, not for privacy, but because light reminds him of her laughter. 3 years since Caroline's funeral, and he still can't bear the way morning sun used to catch her hair as she played piano with Sophia. The Steinway, baby grand, hunches in the corner like a sleeping giant, draped in white cloth that hasn't been disturbed since the day after the burial. Sometimes Richard catches Sophie standing beside it, her small hands pressed against the fallboard, listening for echoes of melodies that will never come again. "Daddy?" Sophia's voice drifts from the breakfast nook, where she sits before untouched French toast. At 8, she moves through their marble mausoleum with careful steps, memorizing distances between furniture that never changes. "Why don't we ever have music anymore?" Richard's coffee grows cold in his hands. "We have music, sweetheart. The classical station. Not radio music, real music. Like Mommy used to make." The words hit like winter air through an opened window. Richard sets down his cup, the clink echoing in their silence. "Finish your breakfast. Mrs. Henderson will take you to therapy." But Sophia has already retreated into herself, the way she does when the world becomes too much, too quiet, too empty, too safe. 40 minutes across the city, Maya Williams wipes down her 3rd coffee pot of the morning at Mel's Diner. The breakfast rush leaves her uniform wrinkled and her feet aching, but she moves with dancer's grace, muscle memory from a life that feels like someone else's dream. "Mom, you're humming again," Marcus calls from the corner booth, where he does homework before school. At 12, her son has learned to recognize the signs. When Maya hums, she's thinking about music. When she thinks about music, she gets that distant look that means she's remembering things that hurt. "Sorry, baby." Maya hangs up her apron, counting tips. $37. Not enough for Marcus's new inhaler, but enough for groceries if she skips lunch again. Their studio apartment tells the story of dreams deferred in careful layers. Maya's Yale School of Music diploma hangs beside Marcus's honor roll certificates. A dusty guitar leans against milk crates full of jazz CDs she can't bear to sell. The karaoke microphone Marcus bought her last Christmas sits on the windowsill, still in its box. A 12-year-old's faith that his mother will sing again someday. "You could go back," Marcus says, not looking up from his math homework. "To music school, finish what you started." Maya touches the acceptance letter tucked behind the diploma. Her readmission to Yale's graduate program, contingent on a scholarship she'll never qualify for now. Music doesn't pay rent, sweetheart. But you were good. Really good. Marcus's eyes hold the same stubborn hope that convinced her to keep him when the father disappeared, when everyone said she was throwing her life away. Mrs. Chen says her cousin makes good money giving voice lessons to rich kids. Rich kids. Maya has cleaned enough penthouses to know that world crystal chandeliers and marble floors that amplify every sound except the human kind. She's seen the lonely children in those towers of glass and gold, their parents too busy building empires to notice the silence growing in their own homes. Maybe someday, she lies, the way mothers do when love requires bigger dreams than reality allows. The morning rush fades. Maya ties her apron for shift number 2. Lunch service at a cafe in Midtown. Tonight, she'll serve dinner at Le Bernardin, where the wine costs more than her monthly rent, and the clientele wouldn't notice if she disappeared entirely. She doesn't know that in 6 hours, she'll kneel beside a crying child and sing the song that will unravel everything. She doesn't know that somewhere across the city, a man who owns half of Manhattan is about to discover that all his money can't buy his daughter a single moment of the joy that Maya carries in her voice like a secret flame. She doesn't know that music, which she's convinced herself is a luxury she can't afford, is about to become the bridge between two worlds that were never meant to touch. All Maya knows is that Marcus needs his medication. Rent is due in 10 days, and sometimes, when she thinks no one is listening, she still hums the songs that once promised to carry her anywhere she wanted to go. The guitar in the corner catches afternoon light through their single window, strings silent but somehow still singing. The 8th birthday dinner was supposed to be perfect. Richard chose Le Bernardin for its reputation, Michelin stars, and whispered reverence, the kind of place where money transforms into experience. He wanted Sophia to feel special, even if she couldn't see the golden light dancing off crystal glasses or the way other diners leaned forward in expensive anticipation. But perfection has a sound, and tonight it's too loud. Table 7 sits in the restaurant's quietest corner, yet Sophia flinches at every clink of silverware, every burst of laughter from the bar. Her small hands press against her ears as tears slide down cheeks that haven't known many birthday smiles since her mother died. "Sweetheart, please." Richard's voice carries the helplessness of a man who can solve billion-dollar problems but can't comfort his own child. "It's just dinner, like we practiced." But Sophia is drowning in sensory overload. The competing fragrances of sauces she can't name. Conversations layering over each other in waves she can't navigate. Her breath comes in short gasps that Richard recognizes too well. Another panic attack, another failure. The other diners begin to notice. Heads turn with polite concern that will soon become irritation. Richard feels their judgment like heat against his skin. The billionaire who can't control his damaged child. "Should we go?" he whispers, already reaching for his wallet, already surrendering to another evening of Chinese takeout eaten in silence. That's when Maya appears. She moves between tables with practiced invisibility, her worn name tag catching light as she approaches. Maya has served enough wealthy families to recognize the signs. The father's rigid shoulders, the child's muffled sobs. The careful space other diners create around private suffering. But something in Sophia's cry stops her cold. Not the sound of a spoiled child denied something she wants, but the raw note of someone lost in a world that doesn't speak her language. Maya sets down her serving tray and kneels beside the little girl's chair, her movement so natural it seems choreographed. She doesn't ask permission. Richard would have said no anyway. She simply begins to hum, low and warm, a melody that seems to come from somewhere deeper than memory. Amazing grace rises from her throat like water from a spring. Not the traditional church version, but something gentler, jazz-touched, and intimate. Each note carefully chosen to cut through chaos without adding to it. Sophia's hands slowly lower from her ears. Her breathing slows. Something in Maya's voice creates space in the crowded air. A pocket of calm that expands outward until even the piano player stops to listen. Maya's fingers find Sophia's wrist, not restraining but connecting, letting the child feel the vibration of song through skin. For the first time since Caroline died, Sophia leans toward music instead of away from it. A series of rushes leans in on the camera, bringing it up to Sophia's face. The bright display pulls Sophia. Richard watches in stunned silence as his daughter's face transforms. The panic fades, replaced by wonder he hasn't seen in 3 years. Sophia's lips move soundlessly, trying to shape words she can't quite remember. When the song ends, the restaurant holds its breath. Maya's eyes meet Richard's across the table, not seeking approval or payment, but sharing a moment of recognition. She has seen something in his daughter that he's forgotten how to see. "Thank you," Richard whispers, but Maya is already standing, smoothing her uniform, returning to a world where moments like this don't belong. She picks up her tray and walks away, leaving behind the faint scent of vanilla perfume and the impossible echo of her voice. Sophia sits quietly now, her breathing even, her hands no longer trembling. For the first time in months, she finishes her dinner. But Richard can't eat. He stares at the empty space where Maya knelt, realizing he's just witnessed something that no amount of money could have bought. His daughter being truly seen. The name tag said Maya. He'll remember that. Richard Sterling has spent 30 years perfecting the art of acquisition. Companies, properties, people. Everything has a price, and he's never met a problem that couldn't be solved with the right number of zeros. Which is why Maya Williams doesn't make sense. 3 days after the restaurant incident, he tracks her down through Le Bernardin's employment records. Maya Williams, 34, part-time evening server. No criminal background, no social media presence worth noting. She works 3 jobs and lives in the Bronx. Details that paint a picture Richard understands. Someone who needs what he can provide. He finds her during the lunch rush at Mel's diner, carrying coffee pots with the same grace she showed kneeling beside Sophia. When her shift ends, he's waiting by the door in his Bentley, engine running like a quiet promise. "Mrs. Williams?" Richard steps out, his Armani suit looking ridiculous against the diner's chipped paint and neon. "I'm Richard Sterling, from the other night. Table 7. Maya stops mid-stride, recognition flickering across her face. Up close, he notices details the restaurant's dim lighting had hidden. The calluses on her hands, the careful way she holds herself, the intelligence in her eyes that money can't buy or fake. "Your daughter okay?" she asks, and Richard realizes she's genuinely concerned. Not angling for anything, just human kindness extending beyond a single moment. "She's better, thanks to you." Richard clears his throat, entering familiar territory. "I have a proposition." Maya's expression shifts, walls going up so fast he almost doesn't catch the change. "I'm listening." Sophia needs a music companion, someone to help her reconnect with... He gestures vaguely, unable to name what his daughter lost when Caroline died. "I'm willing to pay $5,000 a week." The number hangs between them like a thrown gauntlet. $5,000, more than Maya makes in 2 months across all 3 jobs. Enough to quit the early shifts that leave her exhausted. Enough for Marcus's medication, without choosing between rent and groceries. But instead of gratitude, Richard sees something else in Maya's face. Recognition of a trap, disguised as opportunity. "For what, exactly?" Maya's voice carries a new edge. "You want to buy yourself a pet musician? Someone to keep your daughter entertained while you work?" "That's not..." Richard starts, but Maya cuts him off. What happens when you get bored? When Sophia doesn't need me anymore? You think you can just hire people to love your daughter for you? The words hit harder than Richard expects. It's not about love. It's about helping her. By throwing money at the problem? Maya steps closer, and Richard realizes he's never been challenged like this. Not by board members or business rivals or anyone whose opinion might matter. You think because I'm broke, I'm for sale? Everyone's for sale, Richard says automatically. The phrase that's guided 3 decades of deal-making. Maya's laugh holds no humor. There it is. You see that little girl in there? She points toward the diner, where life continues in organized chaos. My son, Marcus. He's got asthma, needs medication I can barely afford. You probably think that makes me desperate enough to take whatever you're offering. Richard's silence confirms her assumption. I've cleaned houses like yours, Maya continues. Served dinner to families like yours. I know how this works. You hire the help to handle the messy parts of your life, then act surprised when real feelings get involved. She turns to walk away, but Richard steps forward, desperation bleeding through his usual composure. 10,000. Weekly. Maya stops. For a moment, Richard thinks he's found her price. Then she faces him again, and her expression holds something that might be pity. Mr. Sterling, I'm sure you're used to getting what you want, but I'm not a commodity you can purchase, and your daughter doesn't need a hired musician. She needs a father who can see past his own guilt, long enough to actually hear her. The Bentley's engine purrs in the silence that follows. Around them, the Bronx continues its relentless rhythm. Buses hissing, children laughing, life happening without regard for the drama playing out on a sidewalk between 2 worlds. Keep your money, Maya says softly. Spend it on therapy instead, for both of you. She walks away, leaving Richard standing beside his car with a check made out for more money than most people see in a year, and the uncomfortable realization that, for the first time in decades, someone has seen through him completely. The rejection stings worse than any failed merger. But it's the truth in her words that will keep him awake tonight. Reality has sharp edges, and Maya discovers them all within 72 hours. The call comes Tuesday morning, just as she's rushing to her lunch shift. Maya, we need to talk. Jean-Claude's accent makes even bad news sound elegant. But there's no mistaking the finality in Le Bernardin's manager's voice. She finds him in the back office, surrounded by schedules and invoices, looking anywhere but at her face. There have been complaints, he says, fingers drumming against his desk, about you abandoning your station the other night. Maya's throat tightens. I helped a customer's child. She was upset. You left your tables unattended for 15 minutes. Jean-Claude finally meets her eyes, and Maya sees something like regret there. The Hendersons complained that their wine sat empty. They're regulars, Maya, important people. More important than a scared little girl. More important than your employment here, apparently. He slides an envelope across the desk. 2 weeks severance. I'm sorry, my hands are tied. Maya doesn't argue. She knows the math. 1 complaint from the wrong customer carries more weight than 3 years of perfect service. She takes the envelope and walks out through the kitchen, past the gleaming surfaces where she'll never work again. The lunch shift at the cafe becomes a double, then a triple, as Maya tries to make up the lost income. By Thursday, exhaustion sits in her bones like fever. Friday night, Marcus starts wheezing. She finds him on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., lips tinged blue, fighting for air that won't come. The inhaler gives only temporary relief before his breathing turns labored again. Maya has seen this progression before. The slow spiral toward crisis that means emergency room, ambulance, bills that will follow them for years. Can't breathe right, Marcus gasps between attempts to fill his lungs. Maya's hands shake as she calls 911, then calls her supervisor to explain she won't make her morning shift. The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai blurs past in sirens and oxygen masks, and her son's terrified eyes seeking reassurance she doesn't feel. Dr. Rodriguez explains the situation with practiced compassion. Severe asthma exacerbation, possibly triggered by stress or allergens. Marcus needs to stay for observation, possibly longer if his breathing doesn't stabilize. The nebulizer treatments help, but his oxygen saturation remains low. His current medication isn't managing the inflammation effectively, Dr. Rodriguez says, scrolling through charts on her tablet. We need to adjust his treatment plan. New inhaler, possible oral steroids. Insurance should cover most of it, but Maya's insurance is basic coverage through the diner. High deductible, limited prescription benefits. When the financial counselor visits Saturday morning, the numbers blur together into impossible math. $15,000, 0 cents for the hospital stay if Marcus needs additional days. $300, 0 cents monthly for the new medication regimen. Copays and follow-up visits that assume a stability Maya lost when La Bernardine fired her. And Marcus sleeps fitfully, the nebulizer mask making him look younger than 12. Maya sits beside his bed, calculating and recalculating, but the math doesn't change. She can ask for payment plans, apply for assistance programs, but those take time Marcus's lungs don't have. That's when she remembers the envelope. Richard Sterling's card sits in her wallet like an accusation. She'd taken it without thinking during their confrontation, muscle memory from years of collecting business cards from customers who might someday become opportunities. Now, it feels like a lifeline she can't afford to grab. Pride has a price, and Maya discovers hers is exactly the sound of her son struggling to breathe. Sunday evening, she makes the call. Ms. Williams? Richard's voice carries surprise and something else. Relief? I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Your offer, Maya says without preamble. Is it still available? Of course. When can you start? Maya watches Marcus sleep, his breathing finally even with medical intervention. I have conditions. A pause. I'm listening. 2 hours a day maximum. In public places only. Parks, museums, somewhere Sophia can interact with other children. I'm not a private employee hiding in your penthouse. Acceptable. And I don't want charity disguised as salary. Pay me what you'd pay any qualified music instructor. No guilt money, no more than the job is worth. This pause lasts longer. May I ask what changed your mind? Maya could tell him about the hospital bills, about choosing between rent and medication, about the way poverty makes every decision an emergency. Instead, she tells him the truth that matters. Your daughter deserves better than what either of us gave her last week. Meaning? You tried to buy a solution. I tried to shame you for having money. Neither of us asked what Sophia actually needs. Maya shifts in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching Marcus's chest rise and fall in steady rhythm. Maybe we can do better. Washington Square Park, Richard says finally. Tomorrow at 3. 1 hour. 2 hours, Maya corrects. If we're doing this, we do it right. When she hangs up, Maya feels the weight of compromise settling around her shoulders like a coat that doesn't quite fit. She's trading pieces of her pride for her son's health, accepting help from a man who thinks money solves everything. But watching Marcus breathe easily for the first time in days, Maya realizes that sometimes survival requires accepting gifts from unexpected places. Even if those gifts come with strings attached. Even if those strings might pull her into a world where she doesn't belong. The nebulizer hums quietly in the corner, marking time until tomorrow. Washington Square Park on a Tuesday afternoon thrums with the democracy of public space. Street musicians compete with skateboard wheels on concrete, while chess players wage silent wars beside dog walkers navigating autumn leaves. Here, money whispers instead of shouting. Every fat panic inch hurts. Richard arrives first, standing awkwardly beside the fountain in his charcoal suit, looking like a businessman who took a wrong turn between meetings. He's chosen a bench with strategic positioning, close enough to the activity for Sophia to hear life happening, far enough away to maintain the illusion of control. Maya appears at exactly 3 o'clock, leading Sophia by the hand with gentle confidence. The little girl wears sunglasses despite the cloudy day, moving carefully but without fear. She's learned to trust Maya's guidance in ways that make Richard's chest tighten with something he won't name as jealousy. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling." Maya's tone is professional, the kind of courtesy that creates distance. Sophia's excited about today's lesson. "I want to sing where people can hear," Sophia announces, her voice carrying more confidence than Richard has heard in months. Maya says music is meant to be shared. This is their third lesson. The first was tentative, Maya teaching Sophia breathing exercises while Richard watched from 10 feet away, uncomfortable with his daughter's growing ease in a stranger's presence. The second lesson brought Sophia out of her shell enough to hum along with Maya's gentle coaching. Today feels different. Today, Sophia wants an audience. Maya borrows a guitar from Jesse, a regular busker who recognizes something kindred in her musical approach. The instrument looks natural in her hands, and Richard notices how other park regulars drift closer when she begins to tune it. "What song today?" Maya asks, settling beside Sophia on the bench. "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," Sophia says without hesitation. "The Way You Taught Me." Maya starts with simple chords, creating space for Sophia's voice to find its footing. The song begins quietly, almost conversationally, but grows as Sophia's confidence builds. Her voice is sweet and clear, carrying an emotional honesty that stops conversations within a 20-foot radius. Richard watches strangers pause mid-step, drawn by the sight of a little girl singing with pure joy. Phones appear, not mockingly, but reverently, capturing something beautiful, happening in real time. That's when everything changes. A college girl with blue hair starts recording, then posts to TikTok with shaking hands. Rich girl learns to sing from working mom at Washington Square Park. The caption feels invasive, reductive, but the video captures something undeniably powerful. Sophia's transformation from shy child to confident performer. Maya's gentle encouragement. The crowd's growing appreciation. Within 6 hours, the video has 2 million views. By evening, Richard's phone won't stop buzzing. News outlets, social media managers, tabloid reporters, all wanting to know about the billionaire's daughter and her street music teacher. The comments range from heartwarming to vicious, but the most common theme emerges quickly. People love watching privilege meet authenticity. Richard finds Maya's number and calls at 9 p.m., anger making his voice tight. "Did you know this would happen?" "Which part?" Maya's tone carries exhaustion. "The part where your daughter found her voice, or the part where you're upset about it?" "She's being exploited. People are using her for entertainment." "People are celebrating her." Maya's voice grows firm. "When's the last time you saw Sophia that happy?" "That's not the point. The comments, the attention. She's just a child who's been hidden away like a secret you're ashamed of." The words hit like cold water. "You think I don't see it? The way you position yourself between her and the world? She's not fragile, Mr. Sterling. She's blind, not broken." Richard stops pacing in his penthouse, Maya's words echoing in the space where Caroline's piano used to play. "You don't understand. The pressure, the scrutiny. I understand that you're scared." Maya's voice softens, but doesn't retreat. "But Sophia doesn't need protection from the world. The world needs to see Sophia." The silence that follows carries weight. Outside Richard's windows, Manhattan glitters with lights that Sophia will never see, but somehow understands better than her father ever will. The video has 5 million views now. Maya continues quietly. The comments are beautiful. People are sharing stories about their own children, their own struggles. Your daughter is inspiring them. Richard ends the call without responding, but Maya's words follow him through sleepless hours. The world needs to see Sophia. For the first time since Caroline died, Richard begins to wonder if his protection has become its own kind of prison. The siege begins at dawn. Richard wakes to the sound of telephoto lenses clicking against his penthouse windows 30 floors above the street. News vans cluster around the Sterling building like antibodies attacking an infection. Satellite dishes pointed skyward like metal prayers. Billionaire's blind daughter becomes viral sensation. Scrolls across CNN's Chiron as Richard pours coffee with trembling hands. Fox Business runs a segment questioning whether Richard's street music stunt is a publicity move for Sterling Corporation's upcoming merger. TMZ posts paparazzi shots of Maya walking to work, her face pixelated but her poverty clearly visible in the worn shoes and faded jacket. The board meeting happens at 8 a.m. sharp, called by Patricia Winters, Sterling Corp's lead director and Richard's oldest business adversary. The mahogany conference table reflects 12 stern faces in expensive suits, each expression carefully neutral in the way that precedes corporate executions. The stock dropped 3 points yesterday, Patricia begins without preamble, sliding a tablet across the table. Social media sentiment analysis shows significant confusion about the company's brand image. Richard scrolls through the data, trending hashtags, viral memes, endless commentary about rich girls singing for tips. Some support the story's heartwarming elements, but others question everything from his parenting to Sterling Corp's labor practices. The merger with Davidson Holdings is at risk, continues James Liu, the CFO, whose loyalty Richard once considered absolute. They're concerned about associating with what they call circus-level publicity. My daughter learning to sing is hardly a circus, Richard says, but his voice lacks conviction. Your daughter performing for strangers while cameras roll absolutely is. Patricia leans forward, her smile sharp as January wind. The board needs to know this ends here. No more public displays, no more viral videos. Handle your family situation privately. The ultimatum hangs in air, thick with implied consequences. Richard built Sterling Corporation from nothing, but corporate boards have their own gravity. If enough directors lose confidence, even founders can be removed from their own companies. That afternoon, Richard's social circle begins its own quiet rebellion. The invitation to the Hamptons charity gala gets rescinded, with polite excuses about venue capacity. Diana Rothschild, who's hosted Sophia's playdates for 3 years, suddenly has scheduling conflicts extending into next month. The private school headmaster calls to discuss media management strategies that sound suspiciously like suggestions to keep Sophia home until the attention dies down. At the Yale Club, where Richard has lunched twice weekly for 15 years, conversations stop when he enters the dining room. Whispers follow him to his usual table, where he eats alone for the first time since Caroline's funeral. But the worst attacks don't target Richard, they target Maya. Someone doxes her address online, publishing photos of her Bronx apartment building with commentary about gold-digging music teachers. Anonymous messages flood her phone, accusations of exploitation, threats to expose her for manipulating a vulnerable child, promises to contact Child Protective Services about her using Sophia for financial gain. Marcus comes home from school Tuesday with a black eye and split lip. Tommy Hendricks says his dad says you're a bad person, he tells Maya while she cleans his wounds with shaking hands. Says you're using some blind girl to get money from her rich daddy. What did you do? Maya asks, though the evidence is written across her son's face. I hit him, Marcus says without apology. He was lying about you. That night, Maya sits on her fire escape, watching sirens paint red streaks across dark windows while Marcus sleeps inside. Her phone buzzes with notifications she's stopped reading, interview requests, hate mail, and occasionally messages of support from other working parents who see themselves in her story. But support doesn't pay rent or buy groceries, and the attention has cost Maya her remaining restaurant job. Word spreads quickly in service industry circles. Maya Williams is complicated, associated with drama that wealthy customers want to avoid. No one says it directly, but the message comes through in canceled shifts and unreturned calls. Meanwhile, Sophia blooms like a flower discovering sunlight. She practices breathing exercises in her bedroom, sings softly to herself while playing with toys, asks daily when she can return to the park. The change is undeniable, confidence replacing anxiety, curiosity overtaking fear. But Richard sees only the chaos swirling around his daughter's transformation. Every positive development feels overshadowed by media scrutiny, every moment of Sophia's joy tainted by cameras that might be watching. The breaking point comes Thursday evening when Sophia makes a simple request. "Can Maya come for dinner? I want to sing for her in our house." Reacher looks at his daughter, really looks at her for the first time in weeks, and sees someone he barely recognizes. The timid child who used to hide behind furniture has been replaced by a little girl who wants to share her gifts with the world. But all he can think about is Patricia Winter's ultimatum, the board's implicit threats, the stock price dropping with each viral video. "Not tonight, sweetheart," he says, and watches Sophia's face fall like a curtain dropping on a stage. "Tomorrow? We'll see." But Richard has already decided. Tomorrow, he'll call Maya and end their arrangement. Tomorrow, he'll protect his daughter from a world that turns everything into entertainment. This time tomorrow, he'll choose the safety of silence over the risk of song. Tonight, Sophia sits beside her mother's covered piano and hums Amazing Grace to herself, her voice floating through rooms that have forgotten the sound of music. In the morning, she won't understand why the singing has to stop. But understanding was never the point. Safety was. And Richard Sterling has built his life on keeping the people he loves safely locked away from anything that might hurt them, even if that means locking away their joy as well. Maya doesn't come to Wednesday's lesson. Sophia waits by the fountain in Washington Square Park, her small hands folded in her lap while Richard checks his phone for the third time. No message, no call, just the hollow echo of Maya's absence in a space that has learned to expect her voice. "Maybe she's running late," Sophia says, but uncertainty creeps into her tone. At 8 years old, she's already learned that adults who disappear usually don't come back. Richard knows better. The phone call he made yesterday, the one where he explained that their arrangement needed to end for everyone's benefit, had been met with silence that spoke louder than arguments. Maya had simply said, "I understand," and hung up. Now, watching his daughter's face cycle through hope, confusion, and the slow dawning of disappointment, Richard feels the weight of his decision settling like stones in his chest. "She's not coming, is she?" Sophia's voice barely carries above the fountain spray. Richard could lie, create a story about emergencies or scheduling conflicts. Instead, he tells a version of truth that tastes like ash. Maya has other commitments, but Sophia has inherited her mother's ability to hear the spaces between words. She stands abruptly, her movements sharp with purpose Richard doesn't recognize. "I want to go home," she says, but instead of heading toward their waiting car, she turns toward the park's interior. "Sophia, wait." She's already walking, her white cane tapping rhythm against concrete as she navigates pathways she's memorized over 3 weeks of lessons. Richard follows, calling her name, but Sophia moves with determination that borders on desperation. She reaches the subway entrance before Richard catches up, and for one terrifying moment he realizes his daughter is trying to leave, not just the park, but him. Sophia, stop. The command echoes off tile walls as commuters flow around them like water around stones. Sophia stands at the top of the stairs leading down to trains that could carry her anywhere, her shoulders shaking with emotions too big for her small frame. I can find her, Sophia says, and Richard hears Carolyn in the stubborn set of her jaw. Maya lives in the Bronx. I remember the train sounds from when she talked about going home. The absurdity of it. His 8-year-old daughter planning to navigate New York's subway system alone. Should be laughable. Instead, Richard feels terror so pure, it stops his breath. You can't go alone, he manages. Then come with me. The words hang between them like a bridge Richard doesn't know how to cross. In Sophia's face, he sees everything he's tried to protect her from. Risk, uncertainty, the possibility of getting lost in a world that doesn't always welcome the vulnerable. But he also sees something else. The same fierce independence that made Caroline leave Yale to sing jazz in basement clubs. The same courage that made her fight cancer with grace and humor until the very end. Please, Daddy. Sophia's voice cracks on the word, and Richard realizes this isn't about Maya anymore. This is about trust, about whether he believes his daughter is strong enough to exist in a world that might hurt her. This is about whether love means holding on or letting go. Richard looks at his daughter standing on the precipice of subway stairs, ready to venture into the unknown to find someone who brought music back into her life. He thinks about boardrooms and stock prices, about the safe silence of their penthouse, and the terrible cost of keeping Sophia locked away from everything that might help her grow. Then he takes her hand. Okay, he says, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his throat. Let's go find Maya. Together they descend into the subway's fluorescent wilderness, leaving behind the safety of Richard's carefully controlled world for the uncertain democracy of trains that carry everyone toward destinations unknown. Richard Sterling has given exactly 3 press conferences in his 30-year career, all announcing mergers that reshaped Manhattan's skyline. He's never stood before microphones to discuss failure, fear, or the ways a blind 8-year-old can teach a billionaire to see. Lincoln Center's Avery Fisher Hall hums with anticipation as 200 journalists settle into velvet seats designed for symphony audiences. The setting feels appropriate somehow, a place where music transforms silence into something meaningful. Maya sits in the front row beside Sophia, both of them looking uncomfortable under the weight of expectation. 3 days have passed since Richard found them at Maya's apartment, since his awkward apology and her careful forgiveness. Since they began planning something none of them fully understand. Richard approaches the podium with steady steps that belie the tremor in his hands. The prepared statement in his jacket pocket, 3 pages of careful corporate language, suddenly feels like armor he no longer needs. Instead, he begins with truth. My name is Richard Sterling, and I've been a terrible father. The words cut through ambient noise like a blade. Cameras focus, pencils pause above notepads, and the hall settles into the kind of attention reserved for confessions that matter. 3 years ago, my wife Caroline died of cancer. She was a musician, not professionally, but in the way that counts. She filled our home with song, taught our daughter Sophia to find joy in melodies, made music the language of our family's love. Richard's voice catches, but he pushes through. When Caroline died, I buried the music with her. I convinced myself I was protecting Sophia from painful memories, but really, I was protecting myself from having to hear echoes of what we'd lost. The silence stretches, broken only by the soft whir of recording equipment capturing vulnerability that money can't manufacture. 6 weeks ago, a waitress named Maya Williams knelt beside my daughter in a restaurant and sang Amazing Grace. Not because she was paid to, not because it was her job, but because she saw a child in pain and responded with the only medicine that matters: human connection. Richard turned slightly toward Maya, whose eyes shine with unshed tears. Maya taught me that my daughter doesn't need protection from the world. The world needs protection from my fear of letting her be who she was meant to be. A reporter in the third row raises her hand. Mr. Sterling, are you announcing a business partnership with Miss Williams? I'm announcing something better. Richard steps away from the podium, walking toward the piano that waits like a sleeping giant at stage center. I'm announcing the Sterling Foundation for Arts Education, with Maya Williams as executive director. $50 million in initial funding to create music programs for children who've been told they're too different, too damaged, or too poor to deserve beauty in their lives. The hall erupts in questions, but Richard ignores them. He sits at the piano bench, his fingers finding keys he hasn't touched since Caroline's funeral. The first notes of Amazing Grace emerge tentatively, then grow stronger as muscle memory overcomes grief. Maya joins him, her voice weaving around his playing like silk around steel. The melody that started in a restaurant corner now fills Lincoln Center's soaring space, carrying 3 years of silence into song. But it's Sophia who transforms the moment from performance into miracle. She walks to the microphone without hesitation, her small hands finding the stand with practiced confidence. When she begins to sing, her voice carries something beyond technical skill. It carries the journey from silence to sound, from hiding to being heard. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. The audience rises to its feet, but Richard barely notices. He's watching his daughter command a stage that once intimidated him, seeing her claim space in the world instead of hiding from it. As the song builds toward its climax, Richard realizes he's not just playing piano. He's accompanying his daughter's debut, supporting her flight instead of clipping her wings. The final note hangs in air thick with emotion before applause breaks like thunder. But through the noise, Richard hears something more important. Sophia's laughter, pure and unguarded, the sound of someone who has discovered that her voice matters. Questions? Richard asks the room, returning to the microphone. A journalist in the back row stands. What changed your mind about public exposure for your daughter? Richard looks at Sophia, who beams beside Maya like a flower that has finally found sunlight. I realized that protecting her from the world meant protecting the world from her gifts, and that's not protection. That's theft. Another hand rises. What's next for the Sterling Foundation? Richard's answer comes without hesitation. We're going to teach anyone who wants to learn that music doesn't belong to the privileged few. It belongs to anyone brave enough to open their mouths and let their truth come out. As cameras flash and questions multiply, Richard takes Sophia's hand in one of his and Maya's in the other. For the first time in 3 years, his family is making music together, and the whole world is listening. 6 months later, the Bronx Community Center on 149th Street pulses with controlled chaos that sounds like hope. Maya moves through the renovated space with the easy authority of someone who has found her calling. What used to be a basketball court with water-stained ceiling tiles now houses 6 practice rooms, each equipped with donated instruments and enough soundproofing to contain the enthusiastic noise of 200 children discovering their voices. Ms. Maya, 7-year-old Keisha bounds over with her violin case, beaming gap-toothed pride. Listen to what I learned. The melody that emerges is shaky but earnest. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, played with the concentration of someone solving the universe's mysteries 1 note at a time. Maya listens with the same attention she once gave to demanding customers in restaurants that could never afford her presence. Beautiful, sweetheart. Remember to keep your bow straight, like drawing a line to the stars. This is Sterling Foundation's flagship location, the first of 5 centers now operating across New York's boroughs. The statistics tell one story: 200 students enrolled, 15 full-time instructors, partnerships with 3 local schools. But the real story lives in details too small for spreadsheets. Marcus playing trumpet in the corner with friends who don't know his mother used to clean toilets for tips. Children who've never owned instruments, learning that music doesn't require wealth, just willingness. Richard appears in the doorway, still slightly out of place in his expensive suit, but comfortable now in spaces where his money serves purpose instead of ego. He carries sheet music under one arm and wears the expression of someone who has learned to measure success differently. "How's our Braille music program coming along?" he asks Maya, watching Sophia navigate between music stands with increasing confidence. 3 students so far, 2 more starting next week. Maya gestures toward the back room where Sophia sits with David, a teenage pianist who lost his sight in a car accident last year. Their fingers move across raised dots with the fluency of readers discovering new languages. Sophia's become quite the teacher herself. It's true. Watching his daughter explain rhythm patterns to David, Richard sees confidence that therapy could never have provided. Sophia has found power in her perceived weakness, authority in experience that sighted children can't claim. "The Carnegie Hall showcase is next month," Richard says, consulting his phone. "Confirmations from the Times, Washington Post, 3 network affiliates. Are we ready?" Maya's smile carries gentle mockery. "Still thinking like a businessman, Mr. Sterling. The question isn't whether we're ready for them. It's whether they're ready for us." Through the practice room windows, Richard watches children who measure success in small victories. Juan, whose stutter disappears when he sings. Aisha, whose foster parents never imagined she could create beauty. Tommy, whose Down syndrome doesn't prevent him from keeping perfect rhythm on drums donated by Sterling Corporation's executive washroom renovation. Marcus appears at Maya's elbow, trumpet gleaming under fluorescent lights that no longer seem harsh. At 13, he's grown 3 inches and gained the confidence that comes from watching your mother rebuild herself alongside you. "Mom, Mrs. Chen's cousin wants to interview you for that documentary," he says. Then notices Richard. "Oh, hey, Mr. Sterling. Sophia's teaching David that song you wrote." Richard nods, but can't speak around the tightness in his throat. The song, Caroline's Lullaby, emerged during late-night piano sessions where grief finally transformed into gratitude. Sophia had heard him playing it and asked to learn the melody, then taught it to David because music should be shared, not hoarded. "The Yale Alumni Choir confirmed for the showcase," Maya adds quietly. "They want to perform with our kids for the finale." This revelation carries weight that numbers can't capture. Maya's former classmates, the musicians who once represented roads not taken, now returning to witness what she's built from the ashes of abandoned dreams. "Your professor will be there?" Richard asks. "Dr. Morrison. She said she always knew I'd find my way back to music, just not the path I'd take." Maya's voice carries wonder, still fresh after half a year. "Turns out Yale was just preparing me for something bigger." The afternoon light slants through windows that frame a view of the Bronx in transformation. Not gentrification, but growth from within. Children stream out of the center carrying instrument cases and humming melodies that will follow them home to apartments where music once seemed like luxury they couldn't afford. Richard watches Sophia pack her Braille music sheets with the methodical care of someone who values what she's learned. For the first time in years, silence doesn't scare him. It's just the space between songs. Carnegie Hall on a Tuesday evening in spring transforms into something beyond concert venue. It becomes witness to the democracy of music. The red velvet curtains part on a stage that defies every expectation. Wealth usually purchases. No matching formal wear or carefully orchestrated perfection. Instead, 200 children from 5 boroughs fill risers in clothes that span from thrift store finds to hand-me-downs, united only by the nervous excitement of voices about to be heard. Maya stands center stage in a simple black dress, her hair pulled back to reveal the pearl earrings Richard gave her, not as payment, but as recognition. She raises her hands, and 2,000 audience members lean forward in collective anticipation. The opening notes come from Sophia's piano. Amazing Grace, played with the confidence of someone who has learned that blindness and beauty can coexist. Richard accompanies her on the grand piano, their 4 hands creating harmony that echoes the restaurant moment that started everything. Then Maya's voice joins, followed by Marcus on trumpet, followed by 200 children, whose stories span languages, neighborhoods, and struggles too complex for newspaper profiles. The melody grows from whisper to roar, carrying not just music, but the accumulated dreams of families who never imagined their children would perform at Carnegie Hall. The audience rises before the song ends, applause building like rainfall until it becomes something beyond appreciation, recognition of transformation that statistics can't measure. But the evening's true climax comes during the final song, when Maya steps back and lets Sophia conduct the combined choirs. Sterling Foundation children joined by the Yale Alumni Choir in a "Yay, Yay, Yay" arrangement they've created together. I See With My Heart, Sophia's original composition, flows through the hall like water finding its level. The lyrics, written in Braille and translated into sight, speak to connection beyond sensory experience. Music lives where touch meets sound, where broken things make beauty found, where different voices, different ways, teach harmony through all our days. Richard watches from the wings as his daughter leads musicians whose ages span 6 decades, whose backgrounds span continents, whose presence proves that music belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. The standing ovation lasts 7 minutes. Camera flashes capture moments that will become tomorrow's inspiration for children who haven't yet discovered their own voices. But Richard sees only Sophia's radiant face as she bows beside Maya, 2 hands that found each other across impossible distances. Later, at the reception, Dr. Morrison approaches Maya with tears in her eyes. "You didn't leave music," she says, embracing her former student. "Music was just waiting for you to find its true purpose." The evening ends with Richard, Maya, and Sophia sitting on the Carnegie Hall stage after the crowds have gone, sharing Chinese takeout and comfortable silence. Around them, abandoned programs tell the story of an evening that will ripple outward in ways they can't yet imagine. "What's next?" Sophia asks, her fingers tracing patterns on the piano keys. Maya and Richard exchange glances that carry the weight of partnership neither expected, but both have learned to trust. "Everything," Maya says simply. And for the first time in 3 years, Richard believes her. 2 years later, the bronze plaque on the Washington Square Park bench catches morning sunlight, its inscription simple but permanent. Where magic began, Sophia and Maya, 2025. Richard sits here most mornings now, coffee cooling in his hands as he watches the world wake up around the fountain where everything changed. Street musicians know him by sight, the billionaire who stops to listen, who drops 20s in guitar cases not from guilt, but from genuine appreciation. His memoir, Listening with My Heart, sits at number 3 on the Times bestseller list. The book tour feels strange. Richard Sterling, once Manhattan's most private mogul, now speaking to auditoriums full of parents who recognize their own fears in his story. Sterling Foundation operates 57 centers across 12 states now. Maya travels constantly, her Yale honorary doctorate opening doors that money alone never could. But she always returns to the Bronx headquarters, where Marcus, now 15 and bound for Berklee College of Music, helps younger kids discover what their voices can do. Sophia, at 10, splits her time between Juilliard's pre-college program and foundation work that feels more like play. Yesterday's video call from the Detroit Center showed her teaching Braille music to twins whose parents drove 6 hours just to meet the girl who sings with her heart. The original TikTok video has 47 million views now, spawning documentaries and copycat programs and endless commentary about privilege meeting purpose. But Richard rarely thinks about viral numbers anymore. He thinks about Marcus conducting the youth orchestra last month, his asthma controlled and his confidence unshakable. He thinks about Maya's laugh filling rooms that once held only silence. He thinks about Sophia's voice, stronger each day, carrying melodies that prove beautiful things can grow from broken places. Kang Fai Hon Hao, Mai La Ket Noi. Not perfection, connection. Have you witnessed someone see potential where others saw only problems? Share your story below. Subscribe for more tales of ordinary courage creating extraordinary change. Because sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes learning to listen is the first step toward learning to love.